Good. So a very warm welcome to this breakout session, which talks about digitalizations and unpredictability, and I will try to explain what I mean by that and how you can handle it and deal with it. Just a short introduction. My name is Thom Birkeland, and I work for a company called Volvo Car Retail Solutions. We are a fully owned subsidiary of Volvo Cars, and we make dealer systems. So if you buy or service a car in Norway, Sweden or Japan, the logical choice for international expansion after doing Scandinavia, then you will be touching our systems, or at least someone will be. We're around 200 people located here at Lindholmen, and we have been around since 1991. So that's a short. I've been working in the software industry for about 20 years, actually, this year. Doing lots of different things, working as a consultant, working for product companies, and for the past decade been part of fast-growing companies in the leadership positions, and constantly curious about how we can develop the craft of software engineering and also the leadership that goes with it. So that's a little bit about what we will be talking about today. I'm just going to start the clock here so that I can keep track of time. So let's start with this guy. This is Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker is the father of model management, we say. Austrian-Hungarian guy, fled to England and then to the US and became this management guru. During the late 1930s, and he says that it's more important to do the right thing than to do the thing right. And the context for that is in leadership, so it's kind of more like an ethical thing, like it's important to do the right thing. But if you transform it and just translate it into a business context and think about whether it's better to do the right thing than to do the thing right, then it kind of makes sense. It resonates, at least with me. And essentially doing the wrong thing right is useless, right? So he said that, and I think if we are in a context where we have a lot of time, and then we can spend a lot of time analyzing what the right thing is. And we can think about it, and we can write reports, and we can write specifications, and then after we understand what the right thing is, we can go ahead and we can do it, and we will be successful. But in a world where things change very fast, then we don't really have time for that, and that's a little bit about how we need to rethink Peter Drucker's words in today's context. Just as some input to the discussion, what does it cost to not do the right thing? And it turns out it costs a lot. According to CB Insights here, 42% of crashed startups crash because there's no market need. There are no customers who are willing to pay for what you're doing. So that's 42%. And I actually didn't check how much money that represents, but I just figured it's a lot of money. So that's an input here. So it's important to do the right thing. But that, I mean, for us, that's not an issue, right? I mean, we're experts. We know what we're talking about, right? So when we walk into a library, we think, oh, great, these are all the books that I have already read. Or do we think, wow, what a source of information and knowledge that I could dive into and learn more about when I need to? Which viewpoint do you take? Because it just so happens that we as humans, we tend to be blind to the knowledge that we don't have, right? We are so invested in the things that we know that we don't see what we don't know. And as an example, and we also really want to make things fit into the context that we are aware of. So if you look at this image here, most of you are likely to see the three letters A, B, and C. And some smart ones will say, well, no, actually it's A, 1, 3, B, C. which it could be, of course, if we put it into that context. And the interesting thing that I find is that in this representation of the image, if I choose to read the horizontal line, I will get ABC, and if I choose to do the vertical one, I get 12, 13, 14. So even when I know that there is an ambiguity here, I choose an interpretation of what I observe. This is a quite simple situation, right? It's just 3 letters or 3 numbers. But what if the situation is more complex? When it's not so obvious, then maybe we don't understand that we're making this mistake, if it's a mistake. And today, in sort of this very fast-changing environment that we're in, it seems that our experiences in relation to the total knowledge that is out there and that is available to us, it's hard to have experience keep track. And then we kind of miss the opportunities that are out there, that the changing technology provides to us. We miss them because we don't see them, because it's not part of our experience. So, like building a global hotel chain without hotels, or a global taxi operation without cars. We miss those. It's not part of our experience. Our experience maybe says, I need to buy a fleet of cars, then I can start a taxi business. And so, or diesel engines will be prohibited. Who saw that one coming? And so the result of this is that our perception is that the world is unpredictable. So this is what I mean when I say digitalization feeds unpredictability. It's not necessarily the case, but our perception is that it does, because our experience does not keep track of the amount of knowledge that is out there. Does that make sense? Okay. Good. That was a key point. Right. So, how do we deal with this then? How can we handle the perceived unpredictability? And so, what I'll do now is I will talk about some of the things that we have done at Volvo Car Retail Solutions to work with our processes and organization and culture in order to kind of try to meet this perception of unpredictability and be better positioned to handle the changing world that is out there. And so we said, well, we need high-performing teams, or well-performing teams, or effective teams. And and this is a model, obviously, so model and real life, they're not necessarily aligned 100%, but I think this one illustrates the point. So unpredictability here is driven by changes in a lot of different areas. So political areas, environmental areas, technology, obviously, and it's hard to keep track. And so if we want high-performing teams, we need to do something to create what we call common will and work motivation, to counter for the fact that the unpredictability is increasing. So this is actually kind of a three-dimensional graph, if you can imagine that. That's why this line here is curved. And so, and there are lots of things that you could do. So I'm just going to take some examples of things that we have done at Volvo Car Retail Solutions in order to try to get the common will and work motivation that is required to get high-performing teams in an unpredictable world. And so I'm just going to go through them. So the first thing we did was you need to realize that you have to change, that you can't go on as you have been working up until now. And sometimes that is called, you need to create a sense of urgency, which can be a little threatful, right? You feel that you're being threatened, so you have to act. Now, a more positive way of wording that is to create a case for change, which I learned from one of the Agile coaches at Spotify not so long ago. So I actually changed his presentation from sense of urgency to case for change because of that. But what we did was we did an exercise which is I think Daniel Kahneman calls it a pre-mortem. So post-mortem. Okay, you have a project, and after the project you sit down and you reason about what went wrong, what went well. So you do post-mortem. If you do a pre-mortem, you are now, but you imagine that you are 5 years from now, and you say, now we're 5 years from now, and our reason to exist has vanished. There's no business for us anymore. And if that's the situation, what is it that could have caused that situation to occur? And then you can workshop around that. And then you start to realize some things that if we keep doing what we're doing, then that might actually happen. So this is the sense of urgency stage of the situation. But then you say, well, we have to do something about it. And so you can take those things that you think are going to make you not exist in 5 years, and you can turn them around and say, if we make changes in these areas, then that's our case for change. So we came up with, well, it's important for us to be a trusted supplier. We need to have frequent high-value deliveries. We need to reduce the lead time, idea to delivery, and we need to attract the right people. So these became very clear objectives for us in changing. And at this point, we haven't talked about what it is that we want to do. We just know what we want to achieve by doing something. So that's the first thing. The other thing that we did was to realize that complex problems requires lots of different perspectives to solve. And one person or one type of competency will not help you solve complex problems. But if you combine competencies in cross-functional teams, then you have a better chance of actually getting all the perspectives that you need in order to solve these situations and problems that you run into. So, and that led to actually us doing a reorganization from a traditional functional organizations where we had all the competencies neatly aligned up with one manager each. And then we said, let's turn that around and put these very talented, very experienced people into cross-functional teams so we can combine the experiences that they have into the right context. And the right context for us was that we had a product portfolio of software products, so we organized around the product portfolio. And then we said to each team, you build it, you ship it, you run it. And then I added, you love it, at the end. And this is about creating a sense of responsibility for the end product, right? So you can't just code something and then throw it over the wall and then let someone else operate it for the customers. You need to have all the competencies in one place. And this may be very obvious to everyone. But it's the realization that if we define ourselves by what we know, then we can only get to mediocrity. This is quote me. But if we define ourselves by, what we want to achieve, then we can get to excellence. And part of this is the realization that we may not have all the information or all the knowledge or all the experience that we need in order to achieve what we say we're going to achieve, but at least we know where we're going, so we can add that competency to the team when we need it. Okay, then we need to work with our competencies. And I'm going to give a few examples of things that we have done. We decided to, actually together with Sigma here, to work with recruiting for diversity. And in particular, we decided to launch a young developer program not a young talent program, not a young professional program, a young developer program. Very important for us to make that distinction in this particular case, because that was a type of competencies that we wanted to get into the company. And so that we launched that last year, kind of last minute, but we were able to get 8 people on board, and they started in August. And 7 of them are still with us, which we think is a pretty good outcome. And then we're now doing the second round for this year, and recruiting is actually going very, very well. So in terms of being an attractive employer, we think we're well on track to do that. Another thing that we think is important in this area of competency and develop that is to increase the frequency of customer interactions. And so we actually have, and this is the second term, we did this in the fall and now we're doing it again, a competition between teams where 1 hour of customer interaction gives the team 1 point. So, and then we evaluate on a weekly basis. So this is, you can find these scoreboards around the office, and so people keep track of the amount of customer interaction that they have. And this does, I mean, the teams are very happy about it, but also the customers, because they feel that we're paying attention. And last but not least, training. I just want to, for the record, state that this discussion never occurred in our company, but because we had a good understanding of the importance of actually training in processes, methods, and how we could become better at what we do. So almost all employees at VCRS have received Agile training, so Agile basic training, Scrum Master training, Product Owner training for those roles. Also Agile leadership training, facilitation skills across the board, both in Scrum Masters, Product Owners, and line managers. It's a lot of fun. We're now thinking about a drawing class for Agile facilitators. Is that a good idea? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay, so I'll bring that. And then some other things. The next thing is we need to constantly evolve what we're doing. But we can't do it on the management level only. We need to empower the teams to evaluate how things are going. We need to empower them to actually make decisions about what they want to do about it when they find that they want to make improvements. To make decisions, to be part of making decisions about, we need to add competencies to the team, be part of the recruiting process to make sure that we get the right people with the right skills in. So this is an important part of what we've been doing. So, for example, now in the young developer program that I mentioned, all of the candidates that come to the second or third round or whatever it is get to meet the team. And if they say yes, they're on board. If they say no, we say no. So very important to involve here. Another aspect, since I think I'm doing okay with time here, another aspect of empowering the team and involving the team was that when we did this reorganization that I mentioned, obviously we created new teams, so we needed to staff the teams. And we sat down for, I don't know, 2-3 days, really like scratching our heads. It's like, how are we going to do it? Can we do this? How does this work? Will this person work in that team? And then we had a coach who said, hang on, you've been doing this for 3 days. Why don't you ask the people who are going to work in the teams? Scary thought, right? And the interesting thing is that you start asking why. Why should we do that? Why? And then you said, well, let's turn around. Why not? Why should we not do that? And then you didn't come up with any reasons why you should do it. You didn't come up with any reasons why you shouldn't do it either. So we said, well, if you can't come up with any reason why we can't do it, then maybe we should. So we workshopped with the people, and we created the teams together with them to put the stuff in. And it took 3 hours. and this was around half the organization, so 60 people staffing the teams that they were going to working themselves with us just coaching that event. Very efficient. Can highly recommend it. Very scary, but very good results. Accountability. So this is if you're familiar with Agile, Scrum, or what have you, then you will be familiar with this sort of image here. So I won't talk about that too much. But we needed to think about a way to how can we convey what we mean with frequent accountability. And our situation was that we were working in projects with a gated project model. Are you familiar with that? Yes. Okay, so gate 1, 2, 3. So gate 5, what happens at gate 5? Launch. Okay, right. So we said, well, we need to optimize for the number of launches that we do over the life cycle of a product. So if you have a product that lives for 15 years, say, and we said, okay, let's say the customers want us to release a new increment of every product every week, then 15 times 50, that's 750. So we started talking about 750 G5. And now everyone talks about that. It almost started as a joke, to say, and kind of a brainstorming session. How can we describe this in a way that makes sense where we are right now? So now we are doing and aiming for 750 G5. And by doing that, lots of things started happening, coming back to empower teams, because everyone understood that this was an important thing for us to do. But we couldn't tell all the teams, who, by the way, had very different technical setups, exactly how to do it. But of course they knew themselves because they had the competencies in place. And so the other week I got an email from one of the teams who said, well, actually we want to release every day. Could we go to 5,250 G5s? Is that okay? And I said, sure. Okay, so about that. And then continuous change. So it's easy to think about, okay, we need to scale this. We are around 110 people in the development organization, 200 total at VCRS. So we need a model for scaling it. So what do? You Google scaled Agile. What comes up? Safe. So we want to become safe. And we said, nah, well, so, and then of course, I mean, the argument is, well, of course you cannot take the entire framework, but you should pick the things that you need. You've heard that kind of argument before, right? But the problem is, what is it that you need? Okay, so maybe this framework will work then. Less scales up to, I think, 9 teams, something like that. Unless you do less huge, which is apparently scaled. And we said, well, it's still hard to pick. And we said, well, so let's just start very, very, very basic. And we knew that the process that we have in place on day 1 won't scale. We knew. But we didn't know exactly why it wasn't going to scale. So we said, let's just start with that and then base our success on our ability to pick up what's not working and fix it. So in that sense, we did sort of this frequent accountability, not just on what we were delivering, but also on the process that we were using to deliver. And by the way, it's not just about process. Because sometimes, in order to scale better, you need to think about other things. So it could be process, but it could be practice. I mean, the way that you implement the process. So automation, for example, test automation, deploy automation, those kinds of things. And that may require architecture changes. And architectural changes may require organizational changes. And there's some interesting work done, described by Mel Conway's law, which talks about the interrelation between communication structures in organizations and the architecture and the modularization that you can get in an architecture for that. So, and his example is, if you have 4 people sitting together writing a compiler, then you will get a compiler in 4 parts. that kind of illustrates the point. So we're actually using that. We are organizing in the way that we want the architecture to look like long term.
And that's intentional architecture, basically.
Intentional architecture.
Intentional
Yeah. So it's not just process. That's the point. And so this gives us the opportunity to discover these things that are, potentially out of range, because we can check frequently whether we are on the right track or not. And so, and then we can actually, since we check and we learn, and this is a Shruhart cycle, plan, do, check, act. You're familiar with that? Or plan, do, study, act, I think was the original. If you do that frequently, you learn, and then you can actually turn around and go in a different direction where you want to acquire experience. So maybe you can get that hotel chain with hotels or something like that. Okay, so what happened? This is the first year at us. We had the employee satisfaction went up by around 50%, the engagement index that we were measuring within Volvo Cars. We did 2.5 times the number of software releases, and we cut the major incidents in half. And we have a continuously improving process and quality. So those are a few key results that we have seen during the first year of doing this. Someone here is interested in innovation, right? At least one person. So I thought maybe I should put in a slide about it. So what about innovation? Okay, so is that part of our future success? Well, obviously it is. What we have done and what I've described here today is kind of a prerequisite for being successful in innovation. Because you can't innovate at one point and then implement at another point in time. This is a cycle that also turns around. And so what we've effectively done is that we've effectively enabled lean product management, which is one way of thinking about getting innovations to the market. And if you think about incremental innovation as kind of the first level, I think we're doing a lot of that, especially on the process level, but also on the product level right now. We have a few examples of innovations that are more radical in nature. This perhaps could be the next step. But obviously there is more to do. So this is kind of what's coming also for us. So I wanted to mention that. Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them now. If not,